Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving into one of the React most underrated but super powerful hook called the useref. You have probably used useState to manage data and changes on the screen. But what if you need to keep track of something without re-rendering your component every time it changes? That's exactly where useref comes in. By the end of this video, you'll understand how to use useref to access DOM elements directly, store values that persist between renders, and even improve performance by avoiding unnecessary re-renders. To get started with useref, we need to create a folder that you're going to work with. Now, you can just right click on your desktop and then you can provide a name of your choosing. You can call it useref. It doesn't really matter the name. I've called mine useEffect, but it's not to be confused with useref. It's just the folder is called useEffect, but you're going to talk about useref. Great job. After you do that, since Next.js is the official React framework, we're going to use Next.js for our examples. So what you need to do is you need to move inside your terminal. You can click on open your Visual Studio Code and then click on this bar here. Then click on terminal, new terminal, great. And then you need to paste this command npx create-next app at latest, followed by a space and a forward slash, dot, then a forward slash. This dot and a forward slash ensures that the project is created inside the specified folder. And then one thing you need to do is just select TypeScript. You can leave the rest as default. And if you've done that correctly, you should see this success message here. That means your project has been created. The next thing we just need to do is type npm run dev to run our project. After doing that, we need to move inside our folder. So you just need to move inside your folder. You will see the name of the folder that you have created, and inside it you're actually going to see Next.js has been installed. Click on the app directory and then click on page.tsx. This is going to be our home page. Great. I have collapsed the div. Let me enlarge this. I have collapsed this div, and then you can just delete everything else. I'm going to delete this div, and you're going to have our own div. Before we look at examples of how to use useref, we first need to understand what is useref. Useref is a React hook that lets you reference a value that is not needed for rendering. Great. Another thing that we need to do first, we need to import useref in our project. Therefore, we can just say import, and you're importing useref from React. And since you're working with a React hook, we need to declare our page as client. Therefore, at the top of your page, you can just say use client. Great. The next thing we need to do, we need to understand the syntax of useref. So how do you actually work with useref? You declare your ref, let's say my ref. Great. And then you assign it to useref. And inside, you can just pass the initial value as the argument. To access the value of your ref, you can just say use the current method. So you can say my ref dot current. This is just an example. Let us first have a look at a basic example so that we can clearly understand how to use useref. So in this example, we're going to track how many times a button is clicked using useref. Great. So we need to define useref here. So we can just say let. So since it's going to change, you can just say let ref. This is what is going to track the number of clicks, and you can just assign it to useref. And we can provide the initial value as 0. This is the initial value of clicks. Great. The next thing we need to do is I'm going to declare a button here. So this button, you can just say button, and inside the button you can just say click me. Great job. And inside this button, we need to pass a prop, which is a function. Therefore, you can just say onClick. And inside the onClick, we can say a handle click. This is a function that we have not defined, but don't worry, we're going to define this function just right now. Great. And then below this ref, we need to define this function so that whenever this button is clicked, we can actually track the number of clicks. Therefore, you can just say function handle click. Great. And inside this function of handle click, we need to get the value of this ref. Therefore, you can just say ref, and then you're going to use the dot current method, And whenever we get this value of ref, we need to actually increment it by 1. Therefore, we can just say ref dot current, and then we need to add 1. Another thing you can do is you can just alert. You can just say alert, and inside the alert we can say you have clicked. So you can just say you have clicked, and inside it you can just do a plus, double plus, and inside it you can just pass the value of ref. Therefore, you can just say ref dot current, and then at the end of it you can just do times, so that we say you have clicked, let's say 3 times, you have clicked this number of times. We need to go inside our project, so you can just move inside localhost 3000. I'm going to enlarge this, so you can just do this so that you can become more visible. So we have click me. Let me just click this and see. Great. So we have clicked 1 times, so it's actually tracking the number of times we have clicked. You can just say okay, let us click for the second time. Nice. And you can see we have clicked 2 times. This is beautiful. That means we can actually track the number of clicks. Another thing that we need to be careful with, the documentation advises against doing something like this. So you might be tempted, let's say in your project, to do something like, let's say h1, and inside h1 you can do something like, let's say ref dot current. So this one looks correct and it might work, but the documentation advises against this, and it says even the future versions of React, it's not going to support this. So ensure that if you want to do something like this, instead of using ref, ensure you actually use the state. So you can use useState actually to do this. In the second example, we're going to track an input field. So to do that, we're going to modify slightly our project. Therefore, I'm just going to delete everything that is inside here. Then you can just delete this, and I'm going to change this one from ref to, let's say, input. You can just say input ref so that it can make more sense. Great. So we have input ref here, and we're assigning it a value of not actually 0. Since it's an input field, we can just say null. Great. The next thing you need to do is we need to have an input here. If you can just say input, and we want to attach this input field to this input ref. If you can just say input ref here, so you can just say input ref like that, and inside curly braces you can pass in the ref, our input ref. Great. And I'm going to change this one from, instead of click me, we can just say focus on input. Great job. We have an input field here, but it's not visible. We need to click it so that we can actually focus on this. Great. Let me provide some placeholder so that this input field can be visible. So you can just come here inside our project, and you can provide some placeholders. Therefore, you can just do placeholder, and you can say something like enter your name, something like that. It doesn't really matter. You can just place in something random. Great. So we can move back inside our project, and we can see we have our input field here, and it's enter your name. And we also have this button focus on input, but this button does nothing at the moment. It actually does nothing because we have not provided any function to this button. But one thing you notice is that for us to focus on this input field, we first need to click on this input field like this. You can see it's actually focused. I want, when I click this button, we can actually focus on this input field. So to do that, you can just go back inside your project. We need to come to this function handle click, which is attached to this button. So you can just say, inside here, we need to get the value of our ref. Therefore, it is input ref, and we're using the .current method. And also, we want to focus. Therefore, you can just say .focus like that. And so you have that. And since you're working with TypeScript, you can just provide a question mark here. If you hover here, you can see you have property focus does not exist. Therefore, this is a TypeScript issue. And to resolve this, we need to provide the type of our ref. Since we know that you're working with input, the type is of type HTML input element. So you can just say HTML input element like this, and this should resolve our problem. Great. We need to move inside our project, and whenever I click on focus on input, you can see it's actually focusing on this input. Great. I'm going to click again, and you can see it's actually focusing. That means you can focus using a button. But let us have a look at another example. What if we want to focus this immediately this page renders? We cannot use this button here. If I'm going to delete this button, and I'm also going to delete this function handle click. We want to actually focus immediately the page renders. So what we can do, we can just we're going to use another hook known as useEffect. If we can just do this and then let's say import useEffect, and just below here we're going to have useEffect. Great. And inside it you can have an arrow function. This is the right syntax of useEffect. And here we can provide an empty dependencies. We're not going to have any dependencies. And immediately inside this useEffect, we can just use that line. We can get the value of our current ref, which is input ref, and we're going to get the value by using the current method, input ref.current. Great. And then we can just use the focus method like that. You can just put a question mark here. Ensure that you have a question mark like that. Great. That means immediately this page renders, this useEffect is going to run, and our page is going to be automatically, or our input is going to be automatically focused. Let us have a look at our page. So I'm going to click on this, I'm going to refresh, and you can see our input field is automatically focused. Let me refresh. So you can either use useEffect if you want the input field to always be focused, but if you want to control how it's focused, you can use a button and track its state. We have looked at 3 basic examples on how to actually use Useref, but let us have a look at one a bit more complex example. We are going to have a stopwatch. We're going to create a stopwatch and we want to monitor the interval. I'm going to delete this, therefore you can delete useEffect. You do not need useEffect. And I'm also going to delete this code for useEffect. We're not going to have this input, therefore I'm going to delete this input too. Great. So we need to declare 3 variables. I'm also going to delete this input ref here. So let me just delete this one here. We're not working with input anymore. We're going to have 3 variables. So the first one is going to be the start time for our stopwatch. So before we do that, let me just have a h1 here, and I can say this is stopwatch example using useref. Great. So we need to declare our start time. We are going to use useState, therefore you can just add useState here. We are combining useref and useState in this example. You can just do useState like that, and then we are going to have constant our start time. Then we can just say start time and a function to set the start time. If we can just say set start time, and we're going to use useState. If we can just say useState, and inside it we're going to provide an initial value which is going to be of null. Great. We're also going to declare another variable which is the current time. We can just do the current time. To declare the current time we can use now. Therefore I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to change this one. So instead of start time we're going to have now. Now is going to store the current time, and another function here to actually set the value of now. So we have now and set now. This is a function that is going to set the current time, and also the initial value is going to be null. Great. The final thing you're going to declare is we need to declare an interval ref, which is going to actually measure the time or to track the time that has passed. If we can just say interval ref, and since we do not need to render this, we can actually, instead of using useState, we're going to use useref. If we can just say useref, and we're going to also give it an initial value of null. Simple as that. Great. And inside this, let us declare a function. We can declare a function that can be used to start the timer. If we can just say function, so we can call that function handle start. So this function will be used to start the timer. Great. And for us to start the timer, we can do this. We're going to call this function set start time. This function here, we need to set the start time. So you can just say set start time, And for us to pass, what do we actually need to pass as the start time is the current date, right? So we can use the date.now method. This is an inbuilt function that is going to fetch the current date. So you can just say date.now. Great. And then we can close that. So when you hover here, we can see, all right, so we are having TypeScript issues. So we need to define this. So you can just define this one as a number. You can just come here on start time. Here we need to provide this one as a number. You can just do a number like this, and this one should resolve. So if it's a number, then null cannot be a value. So we can just say put a value of 0 here. So this one should work. We're not going to have any TypeScript issue. Great. We also need to set the current time, which we have used now to actually indicate the current time. Therefore, we are going to use this function set now, and we're also going to pass the same. So we can just do date.now. We're going to pass the current time, which is date.now. Great. And we're going to close this. And to resolve our TypeScript issue, we can just pass this one as 0. Great. So that we do not have any TypeScript issue. So our start time is the current time, and also the current time is the exact time. Great. And whenever we are starting, we need to ensure that we do not have anything stored within this timer. So how do we actually do that? It's pretty easy. We're going to use an inbuilt function known as clear interval. So you can say clear interval, and this time we want to clear the value of the ref. So you can just say interval ref, and we're going to take the .current method to actually get the value of our current ref. Great. We are going to have some TypeScript issue, and to just do this, we need to modify this a bit. We need to provide also this as a number. So you can just do a number like that, and you're going to change the initial value as 0. Great. And we no longer have these TypeScript issues. Beautiful. Great. The next thing we need to do is we need to set up our interval. So we can take the interval ref, the value of our ref. So you can just say interval ref.current, and we're going to use an inbuilt property or an inbuilt function known as set interval. So you can just set interval like that. Great. And you can see we have a suggestion which is correct. Set interval takes in an arrow function, and inside the arrow function, we're going to set the value of the current time, which is set now, and we're going to pass the current time, which is date.now. So you can just say date.now like that. And then on the interval part, we can actually update the interval. Let's say within 10 milliseconds. This argument is for 10 milliseconds. Great job. All right, so when you hover here, you can see timeout is not assignable to type number. So what can we really do? Instead of taking this interval as a number, we can just tell TypeScript that we can just use any here. Great. And if you use any, it's actually going to resolve that. Great job. So whatever you're doing here is you're taking the current value of our time, our ref, and we're using a set interval function, and it's going to update it every 10 milliseconds. Great job. We can also declare another function that is going to start. Oh, this one is for starting the timer. We can also declare another function for stopping the timer. So we can just say function, when we are going to call this one handle stop. So you can just say handle stop like this. And this one is going to be a very simple function. What you can do inside here, we're just going to call an inbuilt function known as clear interval. You can just say clear interval, and we're going to get our interval ref and its value. So to get its value, we're using the .current method. Therefore, we're just clearing the interval. Great job. The next thing we need to track is actually the time passed. So how can we know the time passed? And we know that it's in seconds. We can declare another variable just below here, and you can say let, and this time we can just say seconds passed, and we're going to assign it a value of 0. This is the initial value. So at the beginning, the seconds passed is actually 0. And then we can just have some conditions here. So you can say if we need to check something. So if the start time, you can say start time is not equal to 0, you can also check with something else. So you can also check the current time, and we are also checking that it's not equal to 0 again. So if that condition is fulfilled, then we can actually get the seconds passed. So we need to say seconds passed will be equal to, so how do you get the time passed? It's the current value minus the start time. Therefore, you can just say now minus start time. Great. And since you're working with seconds, you can just divide by 1000 like that. Great job. Now that we have these functions, we have a functions to start the timer. We also have a function to stop the timer. And we also have declared a method here that we can use to get the time that has passed. We can actually show this inside this return here. So to show the time passed, we can just come here. We're going to have a h2 below here. And I'm just going to say time passed in seconds. And inside here, we're going to pass the seconds passed. So you can just say seconds passed like that. But we want to show this in 3 decimal places. So how can we do that? So you can just add to fixed. To fixed, we have a suggestion here, and we can provide the value of 3 to show that it's actually going to show this in 3 decimal places. Great job. And just below it, you're going to have 2 buttons. The first one is going to start the timer, and another button is going to stop the timer. Great job. Therefore, we're going to have button, and this one is start timer, and we're going to provide an on click. We're going to attach the function for starting a timer. Therefore, we're going to provide this function handle start for starting the timer, and the second and the last button is for stopping the timer. So you can just say stop timer. Great. And we need to provide an on click here, and this time is stop or handle stop. Therefore, you can just say handle stop, this function that we have declared here for stopping the timer. Great job. And then you can just save this, and we need to move inside our browser and have a look. Great. Now we have the second passed is 0, so we have these 2 functions here, start timer and stop timer. So it actually looks the same. So I'm going to provide a styling to actually show the difference. But before I provide the styling, let us first look at if it's working. Therefore, I'm just going to click here, start timer, and you can see we have this timer and it's actually showing in 3 decimal places. Let me also click stop timer. Beautiful, it's working. You can see we have, this is the timeout, and it's shown in 3 decimal places. So this is a simple stopwatch. We need to provide a class name, just a slight styling. This one is optional, you don't have to do this. Therefore, I can just, inside this button for starting a timer, we can just say, I'm going to drop this, and then I can just say, give it a background of, let's say, green and a value of 500. And I'm going to copy this. I'm also going to style the stop button. You can just come here for the stop button, and inside the first prop, we can also do this. So this one I'm going to change from green to red so that we can have a clear distinction. We just need to save this. Great. And we need to move back. So we have start timer and then stop timer. So you can just click on start timer, and you can see we have these values, and we can also click on stop. Beautiful. Another thing you can notice is that whenever I click start, it's actually going to start from 0. And the reason it's starting from 0, it's because inside this function handle start, we first clear the interval. That means any value that was there is actually cleared to 0. Thank you so much for watching, and this has been an example on how to use Useref in your project. Ensure you subscribe and also like this video so that it can reach more developers. And thank you for watching. See you in the next one.